semiconductor industry is the heart and soul of all technology. From auto to healthcare, it has managed to transform almost every sector for the better. Hello, I'm Shiladitya, and this is Capgemini's Techiepdia series. In today's episode, we'll be in conversation with Mr. M. Praveen Acharya, Vice President and Global Delivery Head Semicon at Capgemini Engineering. In this episode, we'll be discussing the impact of technology like AI on semiconductors, the role India is playing in its growth, and so much more. There's a lot of insight here, and there's so much to take from this discussion about an industry which we maybe often take for granted because it runs our lives. But before we dive into this insightful discussion, let's take a quick break and I'll see you on the other side.
Hey everyone, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. We have a special announcement introducing Club Paisa Vaisa, where you get episodes of Paisa Vaisa 3 days before release, bonus and ad-free content, and access to the full show archive. So get your yearly membership today for only ₹6.99. Log on to club.ivmpodcast.com/paisavaisa. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Meghna and Noel talk about NASA's warning against China's probable claiming of the moon and the bizarre case of a man relieving himself on an airplane. On the Wire Talks, Siddharth is joined by Prakash Magdoom, former director of the National Film Archives of India and author. He shares what intrigued him about Mahatma Gandhi and what made him write the book The Mahatma on Celluloid. On All Things Policy, host Soumya Prabhakar is in conversation with Aditi Mutatkar, Indian badminton player and silver medalist at the Commonwealth Games. They talk about sports in India, systematic hurdles, government schemes and much more. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth explains what reset hour is and how to incorporate it in your routine. And on Pop Rap, Nikhil, Snehil, Abbas and Jalasmi suggest what should be Bollywood's resolution for 2023. New episode out on the IVM Pop channel. Once again, do not forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcast.com. We have some super cool and exciting stuff over there for you and your loved ones. Follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, then do spread the word. It really helps us a lot. And of course, do not forget to rate and review our shows wherever you are listening to them. You can also find all our video shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Capgemini and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Hello, Praveen. Welcome to Capgemini's Techiepdia. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for being part of our episode today. Really looking forward to having this conversation.
My pleasure, Shiladitya. I guess this is also exciting for me to be sharing, whatever I need to share with respect to the domain, and happy to be with you.
No, thank you. And again, it's a topic which is, of course, probably something which many of our listeners may not have heard about. So I'm keen to unravel some insights when it comes to what we are talking about today, which is the rise of the semiconductor industry. Yeah. And, if I may preface it, I would say this is the industry which is the reason for the computing boom that we have worldwide. It's the reason for the IT industry at large. It is pretty much the reason, most of us are able to do what we do on a daily basis. So while many people don't know about the technicalities and the industry and the intricacies of it, sure, it is definitely something which affects all of us. And which is why, I think as a topic, it's going to be very interesting to hear about from you to understand where we are going from here, and what it really means. Like semiconductors, play a pivotal role in everything we do. Yeah. So if I can start, sure, by asking you to share a little bit about what it is, that when it comes to, let's say, India as a market, India as a nation, how are we poised to, let's say, as a big player in the semiconductor industry?
Sure. Thank you, Shiladitya. I think it's a good opening, I would say. India, as such, has been considered to be in the recent, at least about 15 years, to be a semiconductor design powerhouse. When I say design powerhouse, we typically have been designing chips for the global industry. A lot of captives from overseas have established the design houses in India. And we do have a lot of presence ourselves, for example, where we do chip design for a lot of customers around the globe. But design means that, we go from a requirement, which is typically given by an application or a product idea, and then we realize a design in a form of a soft design database, which eventually then goes to manufacturing. And before we go to manufacturing, I would say that the design part of it from an India context, we have been the powerhouse. I would say that even in my own career, which I've spent almost about 30 plus years, I've seen the evolution of this particular design part for the semiconductors. What started out with a handful of about 100, 200 engineers today is a thriving workforce of close to about 1.5 lakhs, typically the design part of the activity. But that means that, we are doing a lot of work designing some of the greatest chips that is out there. And not to let the opportunity go, the way that we are connected today in this world of internet and audio video, there's a lot of chips that go into the application there as well. But when it comes to manufacturing, I think this is something that we are at this moment, as India, we are exploring that particular domain of work because manufacturing is a lot of different, it's a different game altogether when compared to chip design. It requires a different category of investment, scale, and also it requires a different type of engineering workforce, which typically is, which is not the same as how chip designs are done. Just to let everybody know that, this particular engineering community for the manufacturing is something that we are evolving as India, as a destination. The government initiatives, the industry initiatives, the coming together of the private industry along with the government with their incentives is typically leading to a game where manufacturing should be one of the leading activities for us in this domain. Now, as you know, if the whole life cycle is not completed from design to manufacturing, then we can't say that we are a global powerhouse for the entire life cycle of chip design or chip manufacturing. So this is the missing piece. Exciting times for India to be getting into the manufacturing space. We may be late, but never too late, because the manufacturing industry also allows us to build the ecosystem around, and we end up creating a lot more knowledge, workforce, and I would say expertise for the global markets as well. I would say that, roughly, if I were to say, the manufacturing side, which is, as we have seen the news, we read a lot of material on the media. There's a lot of companies which is coming around to get this piece of the equation worked out. It's been long standing. I personally am associated with the semiconductor industry, and I can tell you this was a missing piece that we have been asking for from the industry for a very long time. Now, yeah, I would also want to add to this and say that we as India, given the government initiatives as well, it's not a small degree of investment or initiative taken by the government. I guess we might have known that the Indian government has promised investment in the range of about $10 billion for the manufacturing sector for semiconductors and display manufacturing. Now, that is still a small segment of the overall things to come, because semiconductors is not about just display like the LCDs and the TVs that we see today in whatever size and form, but there's a lot more to it in terms of the chips that can be manufactured for applications ranging from agriculture to medical devices to automotive. And you can be sure that there's not one single facet of our lives where we don't see electronics being embedded into it. We wake up with the alarm clock of our mobile, on our mobile, and then we drive through cars, and that is a lot of electronics in there today, unimaginable about 15, 20 years ago. And then we come to anything like space telescope, for example, the Hubble Space Telescope, which gives us wonderful images of the far and beyond. All of that enabled by electronics, without which I think these technology progress would not have been possible. Now we talk about software. The software again is a lot of it goes on to the hardware or the chips that we build around or we use, processors, specific type of devices where graphics processing, for example, all of that leads to a high degree of what I call as quality of data and the kind of AI application that's coming up. Again, take a look, the plethora of applications for semiconductors, unimaginable. But yes, industries take a little bit of time. The manufacturing industry will mature as we go forward within India. And there's a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of spirit for collaborative work between the countries as well. And I do see a lot of investments coming from outside of India as well into the Indian ecosystem for manufacturing. Now, that's a good sign. The world recognizes that India is a design powerhouse, and adding to it the manufacturing capability and the output, I think we can become a good alternative for some of the other countries around in Asia Pac, where we see challenges as well coming up.
Nice. No, I mean, definitely this is a big milestone for us if we cross over into, becoming one of those big manufacturing centers for semiconductors. It's definitely the next sort of stage of growth for the country. At the same
Absolutely.
time, given this is manufacturing of products and hardware at
Yes.
massive scale, there's also a question around, let's say, sustainable manufacturing processes, and
Yeah.
there's an overarching sort of guideline on that as well, I understand, right?
Correct.
So how does the semicon industry sort of tackle or approach that?
Sure. See, when it comes to chip manufacturing or semiconductor manufacturing, typically, as I said, it's a very capital intensive game. The reason being is not just about equipment, but even as basic as having a supply of clean water, or air which is purified in clean rooms, where we get a high degree of purity for air, which shouldn't bring in the contamination into the
Right.
manufacturing process. Now, all of that requires a high degree of power, which I call generic ways electricity. Now, how are the companies, or rather, how are the equipments being manufactured today? There's a high degree of responsibility for sustainability. Equipments are built intelligently. The chip manufacturing industry also invests a lot on chips for making the equipment, which in turn produce chips. So it's kind of, one feeding into the other from a chip standpoint, and then making the whole thing equitable. There is a degree of power management, high degree of power management. The equipment needs to take a very, very low footprint of power from the grid, so that we save on energy. The materials that come out of this particular fab, as the fab typically is not pure electronics. There's a lot of chemistry, physics, optical engineering that goes into it, where there are some byproducts, there are some gases which actually need to be managed better. So all of that is getting into a way of managing the hazardous waste, the recycling quotient, reusing all the equipment, and the aging of the equipment for technology upgrades. All of that is handled in a very, very intelligent and managed way. And I would say that a lot of emphasis also goes into creating those equipment, which does chip manufacturing. We can also be sure that, when we come to our own country of having set up the manufacturing units as we go forward, there will be a scale, there will be a particular size and scale which yields to the sustainability. So there is a measure of how much of, for example, wafers that needs to be processed in an hour or in a day or in a year, to make sure that the cycling of waste, for example, is managed as well. So in that context, I would say that there is a lot of responsibility, and companies will also evolve to the local constraints of what we have. We do have a lot of companies, or rather with manufacturing units in the non-semiconductor space. We also work with what I call captive power, so that there is no downtime to the power on the manufacturing side. I guess that also is getting intelligent, because there are alternative ways of generating energy, harnessing solar, for example. Now, that those are some things which will be utilized also to the manufacturing for semiconductors, not directly, but there could be an indirect effect on that. Yeah.
Got it. Now, on that, again, just to understand, let's say, how the industry will, embrace this next wave of manufacturing. There's also the question of, let's say, people, right? The
Absolutely.
skills,
Without a doubt.
the kind of, I would say, the labor, or the kind of skill set in the people who work in these setups that we will need. So, what is the state of that? Like, in terms of, are there enough
Good
careers
question.
going to be formed? Are there enough skilled labor? What's your
Yeah.
viewpoint?
Good question, because having all we have as facilities and equipment is not good enough unless we have a good workforce which is capable of utilizing that effectively. So bang on. I would say the engineering workforce, what we typically require for the chip design part of it, that is already, I would say, in existence. But yes, we are looking for scale. We are looking for abilities to do a lot more than what we have been doing so far. But the issue is also about when we go to a manufacturing side, the manufacturing workforce has got to be, it's different from a skill standpoint. And there is a lot of investment plan for training of people where they would go to some of the existing fabs outside of India to learn how the process happens. And with the technology collaboration that happens also with some overseas companies, I'm sure there is a lot of learning that comes in from the overseas to India to catch up on the manufacturing game. But all said and done, India and the companies that we have here are also investing on knowing how to do the manufacturing piece. I would say that design part of it is in the hands of the engineers, but when it comes to the manufacturing side for semiconductors, it's largely in the hands of the technicians who operate the machines, operate the fabs with zero downtime and with a lot of efficiencies. So for that, the knowledge base is being built. I think we have, I would say, the C teams for getting the manufacturing side of the equation going across the industry, but that will multiply over time as more and more manufacturing entities happen. Now, there's also knowledge transfer that happens both ways, from the manufacturing side to the design side of the chips, and vice versa, because there is always a room for improvement in what we call as the manufacturing process nodes, the efficiencies with which the semiconductor manufacturing yields happen to the chips that we design. So there is going to be a lot of interplay that will come from the design side to manufacturing and from manufacturing to the design side as well, which is an ecosystem that we are building, I would say, from an India perspective. With more, I would say, the need, as the need for manufacturing has increased, the technology and the know-how and the engineering capability there will come into place. Educational institutions will also be playing a big role. There will be, I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if in case in the next 2 or 3 years, we see very composed courses, which allows people to specialize in semicon manufacturing as a degree, or maybe silicon engineering as a degree, which is much before, I would say, which is already existing from a design perspective. There are a lot of courses that we have in the academia today for chip design, but I'm sure there will be a complementary manufacturing piece that will come. And there are initiatives. The government also has taken steps to promote the manufacturing space, not just by investing and giving subsidy, but there are production-linked incentives that is coming up for some engineering participants, or call it players, who will be a part of the manufacturing ecosystem. So this is going to be a good time to build capacity, to build the workforce required. And it's a in electronics, we call as an avalanche effect, where the electron starts multiplying for rapid movement from one end to the other end of the wire. So typically that avalanche effect is expected to happen also on the manufacturing side. Design, it's already happened. In fact, we are at a spectrum in chip design today where we could do more, and we scramble to get the right talent in from the industry as well as from the academia. But semiconductor manufacturing will pick up as we go forward.
I love the reference to the textbook electronics that you reminded me of. So
old school, Shiladitya,
yes,
old school.
Absolutely, absolutely. On that note, my next question was actually going to be about how new or what is the state of the art when it comes to let's say entering into manufacturing for semiconductors. How are the newer age of technologies sort of impacting it? How have you seen it change? Things like AI, IoT, there's 5G revolution going on. These are not just application layers, which obviously semiconductors support, but also technologies which help improve semiconductor manufacturing in some ways, right?
Yes.
Right?
As I said, chips feed chips. Chips inside the manufacturing equipment help us to manufacture chips better. So that's how the cycle goes. And you're right. The impact of semiconductors overall in the new technology era, where we talk about AI, IoT, 5G communications, it's been tremendous. Today, if I just stand back and see what was it 15 years ago to where we are today, the amount of processing that happens inside of a chip. Of course, there's a layer of software on top of the chip, no doubt about that. But the amount of processing power that the chips produce today is humongous. It's unimaginable. We can measure the flops, we can measure the teraflops of the processing capability. But the fact remains that it's a lot of information that gets processed very, very quickly in a shortest possible time, which we measure in picoseconds today. And come to the point of even power. For example, some of the very high compute infrastructure that we see around the globe and with the tech companies, they consume a lot of power because a lot of computation happens parallelly on processors, or I would say parallel processing machines that they have invested on. So managing the power consumption of such, I would call it as compute data centers, is also typically a great challenge that the semiconductor design and manufacturing teams around the globe are trying to solve. I would say that the newer thrust areas that we have, or call it technology areas like AI, ML, IoT, today they are one of the key triggers for accelerating the semiconductor boom, or the semiconductor requirement overall, from design all the way to manufacturing. If there is one reason, if I pick, as to why manufacturing is getting to finer and finer forms of the transistor size, we talk about 2 nanometer, 1 nanometer of the size, is typically because we need more compute, we need more power for processing data, we need more algorithms and software to run quickly on the chips and then tell us whether we are making progress. So all of that is enabled by the technology of manufacturing, and that's exactly where I would say that India may be a little behind, that we are not doing the leading edge nodes, like we may not do a 10 nanometer or a 7 nanometer right now. But whatever we start on, which could be much higher technology node or a process node, it will not be too far to catch up to a newer technology. Because if I just take a parallel, when we started design of chips way back, we dealt with very pretty much older technology, and then the design community pretty much kind of adapted very quickly to the newer technologies as well. And today, some of the world's leading edge technology node based designs are being done out of India from a point of design. But when it comes to manufacturing, because the infrastructure required for the leading edge process is very high cost, maybe running into billions of dollars, it's obviously, I would call it the corporates and the government typically will take a stepwise approach to reach to that type of technology. But we will get there eventually, without any doubt. Medical, if you were to pick on that, we are I would say, the soon to be the largest world population, right, as a country that we will have. Medical care is going to take a big shift, and chips and technology like the semiconductors is going to play a big role here, because obviously, given the size and scale of the country, the population that we have, the demographics of I would call affordability, electronics plays perhaps a great role here to change the way medical attention is given to our people in the country. And I'm sure a lot of other countries we can leverage that as well. Automotive, of course, how things stand. I can't dream soon of having something where the chips that we will design and the chips that we will manufacture soon should have the ability to serve the local environment or the local context that we have in terms of our commute or our transportation. This is something big market, and I believe that we have a big role to play there, because some of the technologies that we play with on the manufacturing side today may be meant for the high-end market of supercomputers, which can be done by some of the other countries. But we have a lot of application areas for ourselves within the country where we could work with certain technologies which is aptly sized or aptly applicable for that application area, no doubt. So all in all, I would say that the impact of the semiconductor industry for us in India is quite big. Today, the word VLSI, the semiconductor word or the phrase, is completely recognized. Not too many people will bat an eyelid if I say I'm doing chip design, but of course, as a pun, people might think it's different. But the fact is that everybody recognizes that whatever runs the software, whatever day-to-day applications that we run, there is a basic layer of chip or a hardware that's making it to happen. Exciting times, no doubt about it.
No, that's amazing to hear. And like you said it yourself the best. I think we are at that avalanche moment for all of this. Definitely in more so in India. As let's say, just to sort of give closing notes to everyone and
Sure.
summarize our discussion. If given you have your unique vantage point, you've been part of the industry for so long, as well as can see the future not just happening in India, but as a vision, right? We speak about, even on this show, we've spoken about self-driving cars, we've spoken about IoT, we've spoken about AI and everything else along with it, and how it will change our world, 5G, how it will just change human behavior, and of course our day-to-day,
Yes.
what we take for granted, right?
Yeah.
Semiconductors are already things which we take for granted, and in terms of how they enable us around us. At the same time, globally, there's also a shortage, as we know, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
what's a little bit of the future? How far ahead can you do a little bit of crystal ball gazing, as they say,
Okay.
to what this industry will be like, and what will we see in the coming years?
Okay, I'll try my crystal ball gazing on this, no doubt. Thank you for that question. If I just take a step back and think about it, during the era when the chip design was just about getting into the Indian continent, or let's call it as a country, we were just building. I remember the days when the chip design that I did for the first time, the complexity at that time felt big. But today, if I look back, the complexity was absolutely minuscule, absolutely minuscule. Now, how did that transition happen? It's because the change of perspective enabled by the technology itself. And if I think about it, what I could produce at that time when I started as my first chip, maybe about 500 gates a day as a productivity. Today, with the enablement of electronic design automation tools that we have, average engineer can produce anywhere between 1 million to 2 million or even 3 million gates equivalent circuit. When I say that, there is a measure to it. Of course, I'm making a small round off there. But the fact is that time and the progression of time actually will teach us how to handle this particular complexity as we go. And same is the case for manufacturing. Today, we can begin the manufacturing cycle, or the industry is planning to begin with technology nodes of maybe 22 or a 16 nanometer chip manufacturing, which will very, very soon, end up going into the finer nuances of maybe 10 nanometer. But that requires investment. It requires kind of a commitment, which is not just commitment, I would say, from the government, because government will only do that much as to give the impetus to the industry. The industry itself has to come forward, and I'm seeing that happening. There is also need for us to think about devices and products which actually can be manufactured in these fabs that we are building, or we will be building, which will be applicable to the Indian context. It's not just about export. It's about consuming some of the designs and some of the chip products that we are going to do, because India needs that. We can't be importing all the semiconductors that we need for our local application. Maybe it's needed for the global applications, but for the local ones, I think there is a lot of room for us to build and manufacture our own chips, which will allow a lot more freedom of lowering the cost, managing the life cycle of supply and maintenance and all of that. I just give an example. Today, the amount of electronics that can go into agricultural applications that we have, agriculture being one of the largest profession and the largest, I would call, industry in India, it's humongous. There are applications that are numerous. But the fact is that there is a cost to it. There is a education for that to be done. And we are getting there. IoT is one great example of how you can leverage efficient agriculture and produce management. With the chips that we will be doing soon, I'm going to be, my crystal ball tells me that some of the chips that we'll be designing and manufacturing within India, with the manufacturing ecosystem being set up, will make a big shift in our agriculture domain, in our medical domain as well, not for on the body, but maybe outside the equipment and the analysis that happens with medical through the medical equipment. I guess that will make a big shift. And that is, once that particular results come onto the table, you will see that the manufacturing industry itself will go through a lot of revisions, which will make things far more interesting. And we will invest more as a country to make the manufacturing happen. I believe if I just give one more example, if I pick on the area of census, for example, keeping a count, keeping ID of all the people in the world, though we have what we call as the database that's created at the national level, I wouldn't be surprised if in case eventually we all have a chip enabled ID card, which will be common across. It could be our passport, it could be our Aadhaar, it could be our driving license, all stored into one. Don't you think that it would be nice to have just one chip do everything for us rather than 5 elements? Yeah,
of course, no doubt. No, Praveen, you've shared so much about the industry. I think a lot of people who listen to us today probably didn't know that we were such a powerhouse already when it comes to design, and then furthermore have the capability and the motivation to become this bigger manufacturing powerhouse. So it's not just inspiring, it's I'm feeling proud to say that we will really become a formidable player in the chip manufacturing and semiconductor space overall. And of course, your view for the future definitely is all the more exciting. I think I remember chip design, Chip used to always talk about Moore's law, but I think we have left that behind for some time now.
Well, it's still prevailing. It's still prevailing, except that the context of the Moore's law has been changing a little bit. But to be sure, the chips have been definitely scaling up in terms of the same 1 square inch or 1 square centimeter of the chip or the silicon today has more compute, more capacity, and obviously power is another piece that we work with. But I'm sure Moore's law is not gone. It's there,
but
sure.
It's in the fighting. I would say everyone's trying to beat it, I guess, with their own state of the art.
Sure.
No, absolutely. I probably in the next season or in a couple of years, if we have this conversation again, we will be looking forward to a whole different future, building on top of where we arrive at by then. Definitely very exciting, and maybe not talking in nanometers anymore. We'll be talking in molecules and quantum states and who knows what.
Yes. So the size of all the elements that go into an atom, for example. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the currently foreseeable limit, I would say. I won't put a limit on human innovation otherwise. Mr. Acharya, thank you so much for sharing this amazing conversation with us today. It was absolutely a pleasure to talking to you today.
My pleasure to appreciate. Thank you for the questions as well as, I hope I've been clear, and, it's too short a time to explain the whole semiconductor world, but it is, I would say that it's one of the most interesting phases of our industry today, without doubt.
No doubt. And I think what we do on this show as part of, Techiepdia and with Capgemini, we try to give everyone a flavor of the future. And I think exactly what we spoke about today. So thank you once again for being
my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Like we heard, the semiconductor industry has a bright future ahead of itself with the advent of technologies like AI and IoT. There's nothing it won't be able to do. And with the massive manufacturing changes coming to India, it'll be a huge sector which you should really look out for. What are some of the changes you're really looking forward to with the growth of the semiconductor industry? Come and be a part of this conversation on Instagram @Capgemini India, and I'll see you on the next episode of Capgemini's Techiepdia series.